Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Talking Feds duo on a day of really foreboding news for lovers, watchers, and alumni of the DOJ, not to mention anyone who cares about the rule of law and the Constitution in the country. We started the day with a announcement that Jack Smith will be leaving, accompanied with saber rattling by different folks in the Trump camp of how they intend to vilify him and put him under investigation after. And then the big bomb dropped less than an hour ago with the announcement that Matt Gaetz is going to be Trump's choice for Attorney General. We turn to the great Norm Ornstein to talk about Gaetz, to talk about his place and role in Congress and his standing among his fellow members, to talk about his prospects for confirmation, including a possibility of recess appointments that Donald Trump has said he wants. So quite a package of very, very hard to swallow news, and put me in mind anyway immediately of Norm Ornstein. Thank you very much for joining, Norm.
I can't say I'm happy, Harry, but I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's just start with the man himself, Matt Gaetz, and his record over the last few years that I've just written out on Blue Sky, the new Twitter that many of us have joined, that this was really, if there were a parlor game of just paranoid Democrats, and the question was, who's the worst possible AG? He certainly would have gotten a lot of votes and maybe won. Give us your sense of why he is perhaps singularly terrible as the choice to be the next Attorney General.
I don't think, even for those of us who feared the worst, that Matt Gaetz would have been on our short list of who
Yeah.
might be Attorney General, in part because he has none of the experience or background. Even if you're looking at people who are horrible and monstrous to fill this post, he has one quality, clearly, that was at the top of mind for Donald Trump, and that is fealty to Donald Trump. He doesn't want somebody who's competent anymore. I never would have expected that we would look back on Sessions and Barr and say, gee, they were better than Matt Gaetz. But that's the reality of it. Now, Gaetz has been almost singular in the House of Representatives, in a body filled with radicals, empty suits, bomb throwers, irresponsible figures. He almost stands
And
ahead of that list.
Inveterate promiscuous liars. Let me just add
Absolutely. Yeah.
that.
And somebody who's been under investigation for years for statutory rape, for having sex with minors. We all saw Matt Gaetz. Those of us who have not followed Congress as closely as I have, with the embarrassing fandango to replace Kevin McCarthy. And it was Matt Gaetz who stood out on that front. His colleagues don't like him. He is almost like the Ted Cruz of the House. We remember that Lindsey Graham said of Ted Cruz, if somebody murdered him on the floor of the Senate and the other senators were the jury, no one would get convicted. And the same, I think, would be true of Gaetz, although he might find a dissent in Marjorie Taylor Greene or one of the others who would have been an equally horrible choice. But we know.
I mean, let's just focus on his conduct. I'll give a very quick sketch for listeners. So Gaetz was under federal scrutiny for a long time, investigation growing out of Florida, where it's clear that the facts were fairly well established. He and this ne'er-do-well Florida mid-level official named Joel Greenberg were basically on an app and getting young women, supposed to be 18 and older, but were not always, taking them to places, giving them lobster dinners, and then having drug fueled all kinds of drug sexual contact with them. That's pretty ugly for starters. And when he's on the floor of the Senate where the trial would take place, he's showing pictures of his sexual conquests and the like. It was also very narrowly a federal crime, and that they didn't go forward had to do, or these are actually the best traditions of the Department of Justice that he's now going to bulldoze, but it was because they couldn't quite say that conviction was probable because the victim, the then 17-year-old, turned out to be a problematic witness in a lot of ways. But the basic conduct isn't an issue. And indeed, he's currently under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for illicit drug use, sexual misconduct, and the like. So that the facts there happened is one thing. Then, of course, that he was under investigation in a way that he treated characteristically with contempt is another. That's a whole sort of welter of problems that may, in fact, turn up in a background investigation and the like. We have, though, that's on the heels of a long record, as you say, Norm, but maybe you can spell it out for us a little bit, of being, carrying Trump's water in every way and being a nasty, so again, sort of callow frat boy, sneering interlocutor of anybody in the administration, showing great contempt for the rule of law, Department of Justice, and the facts and the law in the world. And that record all is part and parcel, is separate from the record of personal misconduct that probably, as you say, he displays more than any possible nominee. You think about a Matt Whitaker, whose name had come surfaced, or there were two or three others, and they were all, in terms of their views and fealty to Trump, pretty bad. But in terms of their demonstrable contempt for the function and the traditions of the Department of Justice, you can't do worse, right? But tell us a little bit, again, remind us about his role in the Congress as Trump's greatest partisan.
Sure. And, let me also say, Harry, that when we heard that Trump might pick Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State, Mike Waltz of the House to be the National Security Advisor, you could say, maybe it's not going to be quite as bad. Yeah. These are not people who would have been on anybody else's short list for these positions, but they're not
arguable grown-ups.
They're arguably grown-ups. This is very different. And this, plus other appointments we may talk about, show that Trump is giving a middle finger to anybody who might have thought that he would try to govern as a semi-responsible figure. What we know about Donald Trump is he is a serial liar on almost everything. But during the campaign, when he talked about being a dictator on day one, about the politics of retribution, going after his enemies, calling them the enemy within, using the Justice Department by politicizing it, he was not lying. And Matt Gaetz is there, somebody who has been perhaps the worst of the worst in Congress. And believe me, there are a lot of people lined up to.
Norm Ornstein says that between your expertise and their record, that is really, really saying something.
You take a Paul Gosar, a Scott Perry, a Marjorie Taylor Greene. I could go on and list
Jim Jordan,
5 or 30 who are really monstrous. Gaetz just heads that list, and he is shallow and irresponsible. But also circling back to where we started, he has one quality that Trump wants, and that is he will do anything that Trump asks him to do. And if he had even a scintilla of moral character, Trump knows that this is a guy he can blackmail. So we're in the worst of all possible positions. And what we know Trump wants to do is two things. The first is to use the Justice Department to go after his enemies and to stop investigating anybody who might be an ally of his. The second is to hollow out the Justice Department using Schedule F or any other means that he can. And he may not even use it with some of the career people who are there. You know better than anybody, at least as well as anybody who's a veteran of the Justice Department, that its secret sauce is the career attorneys who are there for the right reasons, who have integrity, who will not tolerate the use of the department for malign purposes. And he will do what he can to get rid of all of them and replace them with cronies who will do anything that he wants. And the Justice Department is an extraordinarily powerful agency. Matt Gaetz will blow it up, even as he wreaks havoc with people who have done nothing except follow the law and their moral conscience to try and deal with the wrongdoing that flowed from the insurrection and the other illegal acts taken by Trump and the people around him.
Let me just put an exclamation point on that from my experience within the department. I've been there in transitions, and transitions going both ways, and they do occasion some kind of reshuffling, nervousness. There are certain departments or divisions that are in greater favor or lesser favor. And so there are, people who are take the change of administration as a chance to leave or whatever. It is nothing like this. This is the invasion of the enemies of the DOJ, the people who view these career servants who, as you say, and nowhere in time, the 98% of people on both sides of the aisle, they would absolutely all agree that these are people doing their jobs in good faith in the best way they can to apply justice without fear or favor. And here you have the 1%, the 0.1% chosen expressly based on contempt for that view and for the people who are there. And there are manifold ways for them to make career folks' lives miserable. So many career folks already are having this very difficult choice between, do I stick around and try somehow to strike an occasional blow for justice, or do I, rather than beating my head against the wall, take this as the occasion to leave? And there's going to be a lot who will do the second, and even the people who stay will be sharply disciplined for doing what has been their job. It's just this strange, bizarro world now where they will proffer law and facts, the currency of the Department of Justice, and be not only steamrolled, but really treated with, disrespect and contempt. And I just want your picture of Gaetz, I think, is exactly right. And I just add this extra element. He's got a lot of fawning now, more and more loyalists will do whatever he says in a sort of, even in a namby-pamby way or whatever. Gaetz brings to the job a particular viciousness and a frat boy callousness and a zeal for actually, kicking Trump's enemies, who are his enemies, in the teeth and trying to establish the alternative reality of where all the prosecutions for the terrible transgressions of the 2020 and before are somehow all trumped up and political. And I think that's going to actually be one of the agendas here, to work as much as one can to actually whitewash those prosecutions, discredit them, somehow take them away from history. Okay, just bad. So bad, I gotta say, including the point you made about it's real. The guy is so sort of vile and nasty. I got nothing against fraternities. I have a son who might join them, but it's the worst that you think of when you think of nasty frat types, down to the illicit drug use and the sexual misconduct. But anyway, he's got they do a background investigation, full field. I had one, and they go back to the womb, and certainly back to a few years ago before Gaetz was married, when he was openly and notoriously an asshole, in terms of sexual behavior and the like. So what do you think? Is there, let's say there are 53 Republican members of the Senate, is this possibly, even with this crowd, a controversial confirmation?
So there are a couple of things to keep in mind there. We know that Trump, right out of the gate, did this post on Truth Social. We need to get these done through recess appointments. Now, recess appointments are not supposed to be used this way, but they bypass the confirmation process. And I think we see several people here who would have extraordinarily difficult confirmation hearings who can't pass background checks.
Explain us a little more about how a recess appointment works to bypass the normal confirmation scrutiny.
Okay, so just a little bit of the history here. When the Constitution was put together, we knew that we had a Congress, the Senate given the responsibility for advice and consent in critical nominations for confirmation, but there was going to be in session barely weeks out of the year. Right. And that if there were any kind of an emergency, a vacancy in a top position, and you had people who had to travel from, say, South Carolina to the Capitol in New York, it could take them a month or longer to get there. So, cognizant of that, the Constitution and our framers built in the ability of a president, if the Senate had adjourned, was out for a lengthy period of time, and some kind of critical position opened up in an emergency or elsewhere, to make a recess appointment without Senate confirmation that would last until the next session, when the Senate came back from its adjournment and went back into session. They did not expect that this would be used to bypass the confirmation process, that it would be used rarely. And that was fundamentally the case. Now, we have had plenty of recess appointments. And
there are laws in place, by the way. You can't just put any Joe Schmo in for what you can do and what you can't do, but it allows a president a lot of latitude, because, as you say, we just need a quick, practical stopgap.
Yeah. And we know that Congress now is in session pretty much year round.
Yeah.
If they're away, they can get back pretty quickly. And the Supreme Court, in a decision in 2014, Noel Canning basically said, you can't manipulate this by saying, okay, we're actually going to go into recess, but we'll have pro forma sessions for today. You can make some appointments and then we'll come back. That it has to be a real recess.
Yeah.
It has to last for like 10 days where there's no other business going on, and made it clear it's not supposed to be used badly.
A parliamentary trick.
As a parliamentary trick. So will this Supreme Court say anything if he violates those provisions? Of course not. We know that the rules are in place through basically an executive order from the Eisenhower era, where nominees to these top positions do have to go through that full security background check that you mentioned, Harry. He will stop that from happening for controversial appointments. And my guess is, when he looks at the Senate, and
Trump. He'll advance. Okay. And how precisely?
He will say to those, when senators say to him, this is really tough for us, he'll say, fine, do a recess appointment. And my guess is it'll be Matt Gaetz. It will be probably John Ratcliffe, who has been nominated to head the CIA. It will be Tulsi Gabbard, who has not only trafficked in conspiracy theories, but has, shall we say, a warm relationship with Vladimir Putin. It will be
been nominated to be the head of
national intelligence.
Yeah.
And Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host, who's been nominated to be Secretary of Defense, was drummed out of the military for his extremist views, has vowed that he will get back at those who did it, has made it clear that when Trump says fire the generals, he will find a way to fire the generals. But also, he has pictures up in social media without his shirt on of tattoos reflecting white nationalism, among other really bad things. This is not a guy.
This is a revolution by any other term. So wait, are you suggesting he'll install them and keep them in that way indefinitely, so they will never undergo Senate scrutiny?
They will be enabled to be there for a year. Okay, a year from now, he could do it again, even though it would be,
if he forces the Senate or makes the Senate capitulate on saying we're in recess.
Yes.
By the way, it's just the Senate, correct? That needs to be in recess, not the House.
Now, to go into a recess, you need to have both houses agree. This is where, yet again, as we see the House in the balance, I mean, frankly, the decision by voters either to put the Republicans back in the House or not is first and foremost a $4 trillion decision, because a Democratic House would prevent Trump from using the reconciliation process to continue the ginormous tax cuts for the rich that expire early next year, and to add another $2 trillion. That's $4 trillion there. But it also is what will enable him to do these recess appointments. And if it's a Republican House, and it is probably 85 to 90% sure that it will be there, they're only a couple of seats away from that majority, with about 11 or 12 seats that are still up for grabs, but they're leading in several of them. So he'll be able to do this, and probably to do it again. And, he may decide to force confirmation votes to show his dominance over the Senate. One example of this, we know that Roger Wicker of Mississippi, who is likely to be in charge of the confirmation for the Secretary of Defense, has said harsh things in the past about Pete Hegseth. Now is saying, well, I don't have anything against him. So he will get senators to bend their knees. Now, will everybody go? Assuming that that Republicans carry Pennsylvania and have a Republican.
In other words, that Casey loses the Senate race if he looks to be in the cards as of now.
That there are 53 Republicans. He can afford, and John Thune
defections, right?
Can afford to tell the so-called moderates, Susan Collins, who is up in 2026, and Lisa Murkowski, who is not up, you can vote against these people because we'll still prevail. And that's, the sort of tacit understanding that Mitch McConnell had with them when it came to other controversial nominations, when he needed the vote of Susan Collins for Brett Kavanaugh. She gave it to him. And I don't expect that he will lose on any of these.
And including with the new majority leader, right, who we're told is not the warmest Trump guy in the Senate.
No, but, the attitude of these Republicans in the Senate is going to be, he won all the swing states. These are the people he wants. We will confirm them. The fact is, Harry, when he had a Republican Senate in his first go-round as president and nominated people like Ryan Zinke for key cabinet positions, people who had highly questionable backgrounds, some who lied to the Senate in the confirmation process, they still all got confirmed. And this is a far more pliant group. There's a rumor going around, I can't say that it's true, but it has great plausibility, that Elon Musk has informed senators that if they don't go along with what Trump wants, he will finance primary challenges to them. Now, most of the senators up, this time around, Democrats were dealt a very bad hand.
Yeah.
Republicans had half as many seats up as Democrats did, and the Democrat seats that were up included many in these swing states. Next time around, there are many more Republicans than Democrats up, but with the exception of Collins, maybe if you push it a little, Dan Sullivan, the senator from Alaska, they're all in deeply red states. That's where the primary challenges would come in. So they can cow these other Republicans. And I do not believe that they are going to offer significant resistance when we look to the possibility that we will have safeguards in place, guardrails to keep this from going completely berserk. We can't count on the House or Senate for that.
And yeah, I mean, look, I'm focused on DOJ. It's not just my home base, but I think it's such a fundamental component of a society and a politics dedicated to the rule of law. So this, to me, is not just one of many departments where things are looking a little bad. This is maybe the single most important barometer of democracy versus autocracy, and where they are looking to be a fucking disaster as of today. One more quick thing on, so if he can cow them, as you suggest, especially with an extra vote in Pennsylvania, if Casey goes down, why then still do the recess appointment and take on the legal challenge that it might? Is the notion there just to prevent a background investigation from happening at all? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and hearings where Democrats would bring out the heavy guns and on television point out how horrible these people are. Most Americans don't pay much attention. They don't even know who these individuals are. But it may also be the case that John Thune, the leader, will decide that to protect his own senators from the embarrassment of voting for people who are unqualified, incompetent, and immoral, might decide to go that route as well. Now,
right, I think that's a real possibility.
I want to mention something that I don't think I've heard from anybody else, which is we know Trump has pledged to use the Justice Department to go after his enemies. And those enemies include Jack Smith and probably Merrick Garland and very possibly George Conway and Mary Trump and others who have...
Letitia James of New York.
If I were Joe Biden, I would have to think long and hard about using the pardon power before I go to protect these people. He will get screams of outrage. You're doing what Donald Trump said he would do. But to keep this from turning into a police state, he may have to do some things that push the envelope. And
you named 5, but really to get at what they're thinking, I would think even a minimal gesture in this regard would be like 24. And yet, as you say, it's for his final act to be really, they go low, so we go low. But it would be a political and constitutional necessity, a final blow for justice. And yet he has tried so hard in his whole tenure, as has Garland, to wear blinders about this and leave it up to career folks. So, as you say, I think it's going to be a very rough dilemma for him.
The other thing to keep in mind here is Trump and Gaetz can bring utterly bogus charges against people, ultimately in jury trials, ultimately perhaps with honest judges. They'll get acquitted. But as you know very well, you're going to have the resources of government against individuals who, if they have to go through this horrible process, will have to spend a fortune on legal fees. So
Then
you
in the case of somebody like Jack Smith, they don't have because they're
you
a
can
loyal career
bankrupt
servant.
people
Yeah.
or at least drain them of enormous resources, put them through hell before they're finally acquitted. And then you can imagine him finding some other bogus charge to bring and do it again.
Right.
That's
I
why
mean that's we think he's been impeccable, but God forbid somebody has too many parking tickets and they'll make a federal case out of that. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of sentiment out there for people who were so strongly opposed to Trump to be constructive and do a really serious look at what went wrong and try to, temporize, etc. But I've just got to say, as to this, my first lookout is to call a disaster. And I do want people to know, as you said, there were gradations. We were playing in a very narrow board already, but there were potential professionals on that board. We have really as bad an indication of what the Trump administration will hold in the all-important realm of justice and the rule of law, both generally speaking, which, by the way, is important for all the potential defendants in this country, and then in particular in the special, autocrat Department of Government reprisals with pictures on the wall of Jack Smith and Tanya Chutke all the way through. It is horrifying.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear from these nominations, and let me add a few more. Tulsi Gabbard to head national intelligence, John Ratliff to head the CIA, along with Hegseth. None of our secrets will be safe. And the intelligence community, which has been a stalwart for us, will be hollowed out. They will get rid of people who are honest. And you cannot imagine our allies knowing this, knowing that whatever secret they share that could be important for their own security and well-being will probably be transmitted directly to our enemies, to Putin or any of the other autocrats he favors, will not share sensitive things. And those sensitive things, which could undermine their own sources and methods, for example, could involve early warning for terrorist attacks against American interests, much less for our interests in every other respect around the globe. So we are in for a world of hurt here, Harry. And the worst case scenarios that we tried to explain during the course of this campaign are proving to be even worse.
So far, as bad as it could be. And obviously, people either discounted them, thought either they're not that serious, or, I'm more worried, at least about the perception that milk is costing more at the supermarket, which itself wasn't even the case.
Yeah.
But it's really, as you say, that the United States' role in the world, and what that means. There are just going to be, I think, many situations in which the real, I think this broadens out, and maybe we can stop here. Maybe it would be nice if the most alarmist views prove to be wrong. But remember, even in the first term, when he was so stymied because of the terrible blocks on him by the likes of Bill Barr, or William Sessions, or others in the government, he showed viciousness toward perceived enemies like Pete Strzok, like Andy McCabe. Now he sees this, and his people see this. Steve Bannon, in arguing that his case should be dismissed, said it, that somehow there's been a verdict rendered by the American people, not broader even than that Trump should be president, but all the kinds of accusations and wrongdoing that are not going to be fully accounted for somehow should just go away. That somehow, that it's actually within his focus to try to just erase and change the history. And, and now going forward, he has a much, much, much more pliable and immoral, indifferent to morals cadre coming in. So, yep, I wish I could be even slightly, I could temper my grimness with a little on the other hand, but at least where it comes to the Department of Justice, that we're talking about hyperbolic disaster.
Just one last point
Yeah.
here. Trump has now nominated 3 members of the House for positions in his administration. We're watching to see what kind of margin Republicans have in the House if they capture a majority. It could be 1, 2, or 3. And if all of these people, some going into the White House, you don't need a confirmation, Mike Waltz to be the national security advisor, for example. Others who either need it or, may be able to bypass it. To fill those seats, it's going to take months.
Yeah.
Law is pretty clear that we have a lease Stefanik in New York. The governor has 90 days in which to call for a special election. And then the special election itself can take months. And they may lose their majority along the way.
Yeah.
We know that at one level, Mike Johnson is going to be happy to be rid of Matt Gaetz. But at another level, this is going to be really tough for him. And it's interesting that House Republicans, after the 2 were picked, Waltz to be national security advisor, Stefanik to be ambassador to the United Nations, told Trump, please don't take any more House.
Right.
And now he's done a 3rd one. And it wouldn't be surprising if he doesn't care and because I don't think he fully understands the implications here. But, we could have a period of time where either the House Republicans, just as they did last year, the Speaker has a huge problem because right-wing extremist as he has 30 of his own members who are to the right of him. And a lot of these people in the Freedom Caucus are going to believe Elon Musk, who says we can cut $2 trillion from the government just like that, which cannot be done without bringing a revolt among Republican constituents, but also would cause havoc in the country. And they'll be demanding it. They'll say, yes, we ought to do it. And Johnson, who will now especially want to keep the government running, want to make sure we don't have disruptions, is going to have to turn to Democrats. And there is no doubt in my mind that if that's what happens, Hakeem Jeffries is going to demand some things in return. But it may also be that for a significant period of time, the Democrats effectively have the majority.
Look, more generally, things like this, that they will blow themselves up, that Trump, as he showed in his first term, will do a lot of things to disenchant the public and quickly, are the things we point to now. But what a situation that's kind of
blow us up along with it is the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, look, Norm, as you mentioned, this really is stuff that the average person doesn't pay all that much attention to, hasn't needed to, because it's been such common ground among all our leaders of, basic fidelity to principles of democracy. That is out the window now in a way I just think it's never been in my lifetime. So, exercise, take care of yourself, and I'll do the same, because we have a really important job, I'm very sad to have it, but of doing the best to keep people informed that the stakes here are far from effete and elite, and pointing out that they are really day to day, and the American experiment is on the fucking line. It is just completely mind-bending.
Yeah, and half the country voted for him. I'd say a third of those will like this. They want this. The rest had no idea, or thought that it was bluster, or didn't even understand what the outcomes might be. And, this plaintive letter from Muslims in Detroit saying, President-elect Trump, you promised us that you would bring peace and you would go for a ceasefire. Please follow through. And you look at the picks that he's made and the commitment, and the first thing out of the mouth of Smotrich, the extremist cabinet member in Israel, now with Trump, we have a green light to annex the West Bank. They were told, and they believed otherwise. And I don't want any schadenfreude for people who went into this and don't have any idea what's coming. The families, including undocumented people who thought that, well, he didn't mean them, and will discover otherwise. But let's face it, that's half the country. The other half that voted against him are going to suffer as much, or at least close to that, along the way. So this is a bad time.
It really is. The line from Animal House, you put me in mind of, you screwed up, you trusted us. Norm, thanks so much. And as you started out by saying, it's a little bit sad that we'll be together, hopefully quite a lot, to do our best to bring home what is happening. But I'm really glad you're there for this purpose. Talk to you very soon.
Soon, you bet.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.